All right, I am live here with a wonderful person and a true expert on the human mind and the human body. It's Ed Ley. He is a twice TEDx speaker. He's got his own studio in Hellerup, and I've been very fortunate to actually both help him with his TED Talk, and he has also helped me with one of my physical challenges after seeking expert help other places. I got one session with him, and it was just fabulous. So I'm very proud and honored that you want to have time with me here today, Ed. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for my uh, amazing introduction.
Well, it's definitely true to me. So I think we'll just jump right into it because I think the interesting thing could be to make it interesting for most people would be how do we achieve more? And my first question to you is really, what do you think is holding most people back? I mean, most of us have ambitions, dreams, and visions, but the vast majority kind of stays in the gray middle zone and become, pretty good, decent. What do you think is holding most people back? Because I know you work with really high performers and make them achieve, those extra things. So yeah, what do you think is holding people back?
um, when you sent me over kind of the gist of what we were going to be
Sure.
covering today, one of the words that you used was mediocre. What keeps
Yeah.
most people being mediocre? And so I kind of looked up the origin of the words because I'm a bit of
Mm.
an etymology word geek like that, and it comes from like Latin and Greek, um, kind of mixed together. And what it means is medium,
Yeah.
and it means to blend in, to
Yeah.
kind of be the same as lots and lots of other people. And so my background is neuroscience. I'm
Mm.
a neuroscience coach, and so what I look at is what's going on in the brain that causes someone to do certain things.
Mm.
So I use a thing called the triune brain theory, and the
Mm.
idea of this is that we've kind of got this reptilian brain at our base that all animals have and all reptiles have, and it's been there millions of years. And its job is survival, and it's the strongest part of our brain. So it runs away from things if it feels like it's going to lose a battle, and it runs towards things and attacks them if thinks it can win, and it freezes if neither response is appropriate, and it goes after food and procreation, right?
Yeah.
And what I call the five F's. And so then on top of that, we formed this mammalian brain, and the mammalian brain's job was to have us kind of be in tribes and all be safe
Mm.
together. And this part of the brain is a really dominant part of the brain. It's constantly scanning the environment. The anterior cingulate cortex in this part of the brain constantly scans the environment to work out our level of social safety.
Mm.
And and the most deadly thing that our brain can do is be different. So
Okay.
so every time we perceive that we're going to be different to somebody else, our brain literally perceives this as threatening, and then sends us negative emotion to drive us towards being more similar. And this is what literally drives us to the middle, because the middle is safe. If I
Mm.
parrot what that points at you. If I parrot what this person has said, if
Mm.
I look at someone who, let's say, has got a lot of praise in their career for being particularly good at something, and I parrot what they've said, I can't go wrong. But what it also does is it creates a lot of me toos, and what me too basically means is mediocrity. It means that you're driving yourself towards the middle, parroting everybody else. And that's
Mm.
generally the reason that most people don't rise up to being, let's say, outstanding, because
Mm.
outstanding means standing out, right?
Yeah.
Outside of the mediocrity.
Mm.
And what's required there is to be very different. That's why a lot of marketing leans towards deliberately being contrarian so that you can stand out.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why people also don't want to, get up on stage because you automatically stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the really big thing is that it's what after death they say it's the most terrifying thing is being on is fear of being on stage, and that's because it's the fear of judgment, criticism, failure to meet
Mm,
expectations that can come from being in front of a whole group of people that may not agree with the thing that you've said. And so if the tribe doesn't agree,
mm,
if the tribe finds you too contrarian, they might kick you out of the tribe. Okay, you may not be
yeah.
accepted, so better to blend in, better to be the same, better to be one of the crowd, not separate from the crowd.
Yeah, but what do you then do? Because you say it's a natural part of the human mind to kind of blend in because it's safe and not stand out. But a lot of times we want to achieve more, and we actually do want to stand out, at least on an intellectual level. We can see there is a gain in it. And I mean, in today's world, you can say there are so many tribes. We can just find another tribe if we, for some reason, don't fit in a tribe. But I guess it made a lot of sense. Maybe a few thousand years ago, maybe you were just part of one tribe, and if you weren't, you would probably be over because you relied on the other people in that tribe. So what's your trick really to then help people stand out and achieve more, now that we know it's actually part of our human psychology to kind of blend in?
Well, the reason that we look to be the same. The reason
Mm,
that we look to other people to decide how we act is that a lot of it is quite effective.
mm,
Creating societies and things like that is
mm,
like, okay, so being too different in every area doesn't tend to serve that well.
mm,
We only really want to be different in the area of skill, let's say, that we're
uh,
trying to excel in. And the reason that we blend in is because there's a predictable response. So I can predict that if I dress this way, the response is going to be
mm,
acceptance. So when we can predict the environment and how we will respond and how others will respond, we feel safe. So
mm,
when we want to stand out, when we want to be different, then we need to create that level of prediction and response. And so we need to firstly create a level of certainty in ourselves, in our daily practices and the people that we love and the people that love us, and construct that certainty, and then separate, let's say, the place that we want to stand out from that, but also create a huge degree of certainty in that.
mm,
I try and make sure that everything I say has a lot of research backing it, and a
mm,
lot of evidence backing it in my own
mm.
life. So
Yeah.
so I won't parrot what somebody else has said. It'll be, this has worked for me, this has worked for all of my clients. There's
Mm,
also science, an awful lot of science that supports this thing that I'm
mm,
saying, which gives me a lot of certainty saying something that actually is very, very contrarian. There are
mm,
a lot of things happening in the world today that are leaning towards political correctness that science in no way, shape, or form has ever agreed with, that causes people to actually toe the media line rather than the factual line, that creates a huge amount of chaos in our society.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Back it up with science and obviously having the results that you can see it's working.
Yeah, or at least
I
the
mean,
results in your own life, right?
yeah, and like you're saying, probably everyone is different. So even though it's worked maybe for a lot of people, it might not work for certain people. But I mean, it's definitely a great starting point to have. Okay, it's worked for a lot of people, and there's some evidence behind it. But I think you touch upon a very important thing is with the standing out, that we're probably going to be a wreck if we're trying to stand out in everything. Whereas, pick your battles, um, like you're saying, and say, okay, maybe I want to stand out in one particular thing. So yeah, that's very interesting how you mentioned that. Um, Yeah. So, how do you want another thing I wanted to touch upon is like now we kind of understand, okay, we got to stand out a little bit, at least in our craft and our skill. But what's the thing that the really high performers do when they train? Because I mean, if you look at people that do really well, for instance, in business or sports or other areas, they might all of them be spending quite a lot of time, maybe let's say 10 to 12 hours in that particular field, but still some people excel more. So it's not just a question of time, but what do you think are some of the key components to getting really good at a certain craft? I know it's kind of generic, but still.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. I mean, have you heard of the 10,000 hours
Yeah,
study? And
yeah.
the 10,000 hours study was conducted on violinists, and what they found was that the elite level violinists were practicing for 10,000
Mm,
hours, and those that were orchestra level were practicing somewhere like 8,000 hours, and then the good
mm,
amateurs or perhaps teachers had practiced for like 6,000 hours. But one of the interesting things that they don't often touch on from
mm,
the study is that those that were practicing for 10,000 hours also slept for 8.5 hours on average and napped more. And so
yeah.
it so it's not directly evident that more practice is the only thing that makes a difference, but actually it being only that practice and there being an awful lot of rest around that. I
Mm,
would also say that what the 10,000 hour rule kind of exposes as well is that process is the thing that makes the difference.
mm,
Focusing on process rather than on outcome is far more effective, because while you're mentally focusing on the outcome, um, you're not focusing on mastering the process of the
mm,
skill that you're trying to learn. You're thinking about how amazing it will be when you get there,
mm.
but
Yeah.
actually there are studies that show that those people who focus on the outcome enough get enough of the positive emotion
Mm,
to no longer want to achieve the goal. They feel like they've done it,
yeah.
so they don't go through the process. Whereas those who focus on the process of mastery,
Mm.
rather in and of itself, trying to master the thing rather than trying to chase the outcome, tend to master their skill far more quickly.
Yeah, I think that's important. And one thing I realized in my life also is, I mean, sure, we can have a goal and outcome we desire, but it's not really in our control. Let's say I'm on LinkedIn and say, okay, I would like a post within the next 3 months to have at least 100 comments. Well, that is a goal, but it's not really in my control. Whereas I could have a process that would be, okay, I got to make a video every week, and I should at least try to add one new thing or certain thing that could improve it, or try a new skill that would be within my you can say I could control that, whereas the outcome is just okay, it's maybe going to happen if you do all these things, but you can't be sure. So I
Sure,
think focusing
and
on the
you
process is way more important. Yeah.
absolutely. And then you might look at even deeper at the process and say, what's the intent of this video? Like,
mm,
it's great that you want to put out a video, but
mm,
why do you want to put out a video? What
yeah.
are you trying to evoke in the other person? Are you trying to create doubt in the person watching it that the process that they're currently doing to become a good public speaker
mm,
is the best process for them? Are you trying to create doubt in their belief that they can't become a better public speaker?
mm,
Or are you trying to inform someone so that they literally become a better public speaker for having watched your thing? It's like, what's my intent of the process, and what are the ingredients of producing the outcome of my intent?
yeah. I think you mentioned a very important word, which is intention. And I think a lot of people, especially in public speaking, they forget what's your intention. Like when you get up to speak, then people are often, my intention is just to inform about this or talk about this topic. No, but really, what's your intention? How are you going to help people? How are you going to give them value? Is that to have a fun talk? Is it to have an, a new insight? Is it just to give some tools and tricks? So really, I think everything starts with the intention, like you say. Um, so, and I also read this study you mentioned with the violinist. So that's interesting that we don't tend to focus a lot on the sleeping and how to recover. I read a study from I think it was Roger Federer, that he would actually sleep about 12 hours a day, which is a lot, half the day, which just means he could practice more, and then you can obviously cram more hours. And what I also read in that study was that actually having multiple trainings is better. That one long training, it kind of, your brain is primed that this is very important. So I guess let's say you have 1 hour to practice something, it's probably better to do 15 minutes 4 times a week than an hour. Obviously, it depends a little bit on the topic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was going to say the what obviously our brain has a nervous system plugged
Mm,
into it, and this nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, it has two branches to it, and one branch is the sympathetic nervous system,
mm,
and this governs the fight, flight, or freeze response. So exercise, intense physical
mm,
exertion, fear, all of those things, and then the other side is the parasympathetic, and that
mm,
um, governs learning and memory consolidation and
mm,
rest, recovery, and repair. And the bit I wanted to focus on there was the
mm.
memory consolidation.
Yeah,
So the sympathetic nervous system is generally, if you're doing a physical thing or you're doing something new, essentially you're under some degree of threat because your brain
yeah,
doesn't love the opportunity to be judged, right? The
yeah,
if I'm doing something poorly, then there's judgment. There's part and parcel of that is I could be judged as not being good, right?
yeah.
So it's you're using your sympathetic nervous system there, and then so you are required to go into your parasympathetic nervous system to actually consolidate what you've learned.
Mm,
So when we're deprived of sleep, one of the first things that
yeah,
goes is our memory, right?
mm,
And when we have enough sleep, one of the first things that returns
yeah,
is our memory, right? We can remember more conversations,
mm,
and we can make more neural connections. And so the consolidation of the stuff that we've done today happens in our sleep. If we don't
mm.
get enough sleep, there's no consolidation of the stuff that we've done that day.
Yeah, that's a pity. You put in all the hard work, and then you kind of don't reap the easy benefit, which is sleeping, recovering. And then it kind of reminds me of a phrase you cannot not hear this phrase. You open Instagram, YouTube, whatever social media, and they always put out, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to get out of that comfort zone, which is a lot of truth to. But there's also a lot of truth, I think, get back in your comfort zone so you get the energy, right? And you do actually recover and get that energy so you can then actually get out of the zone and then expand. So I think we tend to forget that a lot, and it's not so sexy probably to say, yeah, yesterday I had 9 hours of sleep because I really want to do well today. It's much more sexy to say, yeah, I'm only sleeping 6 hours, I'm really cramming it. And but we need to yeah, take care of ourselves. And I think another important point is probably that I do sometimes think about is, sure, we can probably have a period of time where we can, go with less sleep, a little bit less recovery, but in the end, there's a price to pay. And looking at what is one's long-term ambitions and goals, then I think it makes more sense to say, you know what, I'm in it for the long run. If you have a test the day after, okay, maybe you want to do it. There can be certain situations that make sense, but for a long-term goal, get the sleep, get the recovery, and you're going to do much better in the long run. Don't you
Yeah,
agree?
I absolutely do. I was going to add to that and say that if there's no memory consolidation unless sleep is sufficient, then there is no amount of sleep deprivation that is effective. So if you say I need to sleep 8 hours, right, and it's variable between people, but it doesn't veer that far outside of 8 hours. If you get 8 hours and then the following day you get 7, you're 1 hour sleep deprived. So the next day your blood would test as pre-diabetic. So you're going to crave sugar. You're going to crave sugar. You're going to be snappy. You're going to be moodier. You're going to have less focus. Your brain function will be 10 or 11% less, and you probably won't even notice. And then you do it the next day, and the same thing happens. You do it the next day, and then your brain calibrates so you don't even know. Now, ultimately, the things that you do today, if you do them really, really well, and then you consolidate that with good sleep, the next day you'll be more of a master at those things, so they will take you less time. Whereas if you don't get enough sleep, you won't consolidate them. They'll take you more time or the same amount of time. So you will literally not get better at anything that you're doing. So there's no route to mastery that has less than the amount of sleep that you need.
Yeah. And I think that's an important reminder, keep doing the simple things. That is what is going to help us in the long run. So yeah, creating a habit about that, about sleep and other things. For me, one of the key elements to success, and I want to hear your thoughts about that, is creating habits, because that tends to, like, you have a habit, things are just easier to do instead of having to spend a lot of energy trying to implement new things. What's your thoughts on implementing habits? How powerful are there? Any tips and tricks to get into a habit? Yeah, let me hear what you think about that, Ed.
Well, it's our beliefs that inform
Yeah,
our actions, right?
yeah,
So if you believe, for example, that hard work is the route to success, then
mm,
you're probably going to sacrifice sleep, because
yeah,
that's your belief, and you've probably got evidence that supports it in your own life, right? So
mm,
our actual beliefs are informed by the evidence that is present in our own life. Okay,
mm,
that's point one. Point
yeah,
two is that 90 to 95% of our day is done on autopilot, which means
yeah,
habitually. And so pretty much all of our life, bar a few things, are habits. And the only reason that we end up doing something slightly different each
mm,
day, or some days doing one thing and some days doing another when posed with the same question, is the part of our brain that we're operating from in that environment. So our habits are a triggered response to our environment, right? So we go
mm,
into an environment, internal
mm,
environment and external environment
mm,
combined creates inside feelings and outside feelings. Okay,
yeah,
so we get feelings in response to the place that we're in and what it looks like, and the
yeah,
people that are there, and our inside environment, how we've kind of treated ourselves, right? And
mm,
then our brain goes, when this combination of internal and external environment is present, this is the habit that we enact. And
yeah,
then it follows through that process. So what we need to do is we need to establish the internal and external environments that trigger the behaviors that we want. And so
mm,
if we can create the environments around us that we want to optimize our performance, then
mm,
naturally building the habits that we want, right?
yeah,
Obviously, this is a really
mm,
broad idea, and it is helpful to narrow down. But all of life is cause and effect, right? The things that
yeah,
we do create our effects. So what we
yeah,
have to do is take an honest inventory of all of the good stuff in our lives
mm,
that are there because of our habits, and all of the bad stuff in our lives that are there because of our habits, and then say, what am I doing that is causing the effect of these negative outcomes? Or, as I do with my clients, what is it that I believe about the world that is causing these habits, that is causing these effects?
Yeah, so you can say your methodology is very much going, what's the root cause, right? And discovering that. Because once you find the root cause, you can actually treat that rather than if you just say, okay, I mean, I know you work with people also on the physical fitness level. Could be, yeah, you need to go out and run at least, I don't know, 3 times a week, and you need to eat healthier, which is just kind of treating the symptoms, right? Rather than discovering why you might not eat optimally. Maybe you had a childhood issue, or I don't know, whatever it could be. Is that an example?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a really good example, right? Because um, if something hurts us, we generally put it down again, right? So
Mm,
if something is hurting us, for us to pick it up again, something's kind of going wrong there, and so we need to work out what it is that's causing the effect, right? For
yeah.
example, for example, if we're not exercising, then something is happening that's causing us to not exercise. It's not that, oh, I just never got around to it,
No.
and it's not that I don't like it either. It's neither of those things, because we know that every single mammal exercises,
Mm,
um, and so something has happened that has caused this person to no longer be an exerciser, right? So
mm,
it could be that um, the perceived threat of I don't have enough time to do my job
mm, yeah.
causes the exercise to drop away, right? Something
Mm,
more threatening has appeared, and then the brain's strategy for
mm,
doing that has gone, well, if you take away exercise and you take away sleep, and maybe you skip a couple of meals, you'll have more time, so
mm,
you can get more done. Okay, so there's a belief there that is something along the lines of, if I stop doing all of the other things, I'll be more productive. Okay,
yeah.
that is informing all of it, and there's evidence today that that has worked, but there'll be evidence in 10 years time, or maybe it's
Mm,
evidence that's appeared today for some people that is, okay, that was a faulty belief because I'm now
mm,
sick and
yeah.
overweight or in pain or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I agree a lot with you. I remember when I did my PhD project, the first, I think, 1.5 years, I didn't have a kid. Then I got a kid. And obviously, when you get a kid, your wife tells you, you got to be home, right? So you got to spend time with the kid. Obviously, I wanted to do that. But before I had my kid, I could pretty much spend all the time I wanted on my project. So, having a 10-hour workday was typical. And I remember not being as efficient as I could be, maybe having a little bit longer coffee break because, oh, there's this boring thing I got to do and get done. But when I had a kid, I knew, okay, I'm at 8 in the morning. I will finish at 4 no matter what, because it's more important for me to get home, be with my child and my wife. And the funny thing is, I got the same amount done. And I'm sure that if I had had less time, I could probably have done the same amount of work in 6 hours. Obviously, there is a lower limit to how much you can get done in time, but a lot of times I think we aren't utilizing the um, the efficiency we actually can gain. And I know there are people out there in the world that are successful and driving a pretty solid business doing 2 to 3 hours. I know you're one of them that aren't, doing loads of hours, but still doing very well in your business. So what's your, productivity hack to kind of get things done? One of the important things you just mentioned is what's the fear? Because once that fear is gone, it's a lot easier to get things done. But are there other things that can increase our productivity?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it once again it comes down to process again,
Yeah.
more so than more so than productivity, right? You could put out, just to give an example, right? If you go, I would like to get more clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so more clients, and the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to put out a lot of content. And the a lot of content that I put out is going to attract lots of people. Let's say it attracts lots of people. I spend 2 hours putting out content, coming up with it every day, and researching into it. And what I get is I get a lot of people knocking at my door asking to work with me, and I get 50% of them can't afford it. 50% of 50% of the 50% that could afford it were just window shopping.
Okay.
And then half of the remaining 25% aren't my ideal customer. So now I'm wasting 80. Wow, I've messed myself up with math. I'm wasting 80% of my time with the customer, the wrong inquiries. Whereas if I go, what's the process, and I zero right in and I say, who is my ideal client? Who do I work with and who do I not work with? And how do I vet for the ideal client? Right, that's point one. So now my content is driven at the only person that I want to work with. Okay, so now I'm speaking to a very small group of people that meet a specific criteria. I've saved a whole bunch of time there now, because now almost 100% of the people that inquire to work with me are already my ideal client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good idea. Obviously, I don't know how you do it. I just came up, you could send, 10 questions, fill out this survey, or those questions, you can kind of see if you're an ideal client, and a lot of people maybe won't answer it, and okay, you're not serious about this. Could that be a way?
I already know who my ideal client is, because I've already worked with them and I already work with them, right? I just write down their names and I go, what are their unifying traits and positions, and what were their unifying struggles that I was most able to help them with, most enjoyed helping them with. And then I've got that kind of that profile. So I've saved a lot of time there. And then what's the process that someone needs to go through in order to become a client? Well, they firstly, they need to doubt their current method. So and if they don't doubt their current method, then they're probably happy with their current method, or they're unhappy with their current method, but they think it's the only way. So then I need to point my finger at that way. And then this is another efficiency in the process. And then they need to desire a different experience of life. They need to want something different. For example, they need to have had a child and need a different way of studying for their PhD, because the way that they were currently doing it isn't working, right? So that was essentially a pain for you. You recognized a pain and had to come up with another way of doing it. So you believed it could be different and you came up with a better way, right? Whereas you could have gone, this is the only way, darling, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to see my child. Right. But you didn't do that. You found a different way, right? So this is what I'm talking about. It's going, what is the outcome that I'm looking for? And all of my clients, and you as well, and everyone has this kind of picture of a dream life. But what we tend to do is we tend to mentally down prioritize things that we said were our dreams that we're not currently realizing. I mean, it's like, I had a dream of spending 4 hours with my kids every afternoon, but work hard. I have to work hard in order to be successful. So I can't do that. So we down prioritize our dream in order to justify our current belief.
Or I don't know if I'm wrong, or at least think we can't change it.
That's kind of what I mean. So I can't have this, I can't change this. But it's still, we let those dreams of the dream life drift, rather than going, I'm going to keep focusing on trying to create the process to success, the success as I've determined it. You know, the amount of time we want with our children, with our partners, the health that we want to experience or not experience, the amount of sleep we want to get, the adventure, the travel, the fun, the time with our friends, the experience of life that we want. Often we down prioritize because of the way that it is, right?
So as I understand, what you're saying is you have this set of goals or outcomes you want, but that isn't really the most important thing. It's like putting that down and then discovering what's the process to get there. So the process is really the heart of achieving more, right?
Absolutely. Believing that there is a process that
Mm.
could make things better than they are right now.
Well, what do you think is then stopping people from believing in a process? Because I mean, so there are so many processes out there, and I mean, most people are fairly intelligent. They would be able to follow, a certain process, but for some reason, a lot of people don't, and including myself. There are certain things I know I could probably get better at if I followed a certain process, but sometimes I end up not following it or taking action on it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the way that our brain learns is through a process called neuroassociation,
yeah,
which basically means new neural connections inside our brain.
yeah,
Um, that, let's say it's a web, right? And
mm,
we can add another point into that web.
mm,
But starting a new web is almost impossible, right? So
yeah,
we pick up a book and
yeah,
we read a load of stuff, and it's either too alien and we go, that's too far away from where I am now, I don't even
mm,
get it, or
yeah,
it points the finger at something that we already know and we say, I already know that, which is like the most dreaded words that we can ever utter. What we need to be looking at is, do I already do that? So
yeah,
new
yeah,
process is more about digging really, really, really deeply to gaining awareness of what your current process is,
mm,
and then going, what could be different. So if we look at it from a diet perspective, if I hand
yeah,
you a new diet, your
yeah,
chances of following it are slim to none.
yeah,
That, yeah, we know
yeah,
that
yeah.
because diet failure is what, there's 4%
Mm,
success rate in
okay.
diets.
Mm,
Okay, whereas if I looked directly at your diet, yeah, and we photographed everything that you consumed for a week,
mm,
the exact recipe of what you tend to eat in a week, right?
yeah,
And then if I said, here's your current reality, and then here's like the ideal,
mm,
what's the smallest, most fun step you could take towards that, and you
yeah,
came up with it, then you'd be like, okay, this makes sense. I can integrate this,
yeah,
and because it fits within this neuro association, it fits within the stuff that I believe, and I'm willing to test it for 14 days,
yeah,
with a little effort. And then that's building on our process. So it's not necessarily about finding someone else's process. It's saying, what's my
mm,
existing process, and what could I, A, stop doing to improve this process, and
yeah.
then B, start doing to improve this process.
Yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned this. Like, okay, maybe in this example, this person didn't believe he could make this big change, but then you said, okay, what's the next step? So we can probably see what's the next step. And for instance, in my own case, at the moment, I'm trying to learn how to get better with video and maybe put out a few things that's funny, interesting. And I've never seen myself being very good with technical things like video editing, setting up web pages, even though I have an engineering background. So people think you should be good at this. And I got a little bit overwhelmed when I saw other people putting out these great videos with things flying in. It was really funny, entertaining cuts. And then I realized, okay, why don't you just put down a list, like 10 simple things I could learn? How to cut out in a video, how to add sound to a video, how to, add a picture over sound, and doing like these simple things. And actually, I've been doing this for, studying this for a few weeks now, 2 weeks. and it's starting to be more fun, more interesting. I'm still, a novice to the field, but that helped me because I could see the next step, which is just like, okay, I do this thing in this YouTube video that tells me you just got to click here and do this. And even though I failed in some of the things, oh yeah, it's just to do this and this. So really good key takeaway you mentioned here, Ed. It's just to focus on the next step. Yeah,
Absolutely. So it's
that's a
focusing
great
on
point.
the process rather
Yeah,
than, because outcome is often comparison led, right? It's what are
yeah,
other people doing that's working well, that's great. So we
mm,
compare and then we go, so we're mentally somewhere else. We're
mm,
constantly looking at that rather than going, okay, how do I make what's my exact process at the
mm,
moment?
yeah,
What's that producing? And then what can I try that would be
mm,
that might improve that process? And how will I know if the process is improved?
yeah. Well, I mean, it'd be nice if people can measure what's working and what's not working, obviously. So yeah, I guess that depends a little bit on the field people are in. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything more. I mean, I've asked you a bunch of questions, but maybe you have something you want to share and say, you know what, this is what people often need to know that they don't know they need. You probably have a bunch of clients coming to you and they're like, I just need a little bit of help with this, and this. And then you discover, well, it's probably not really that. It's probably over here somewhere. Um, I don't know if that's
Yeah,
right or,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That's the one of the kind of the primary tenets of my kind of neuroscience approach to
Mm,
coaching is that the thing is not the thing. The problem is not the problem. So
yeah.
anytime we're trying to work out what the problem is, people might point to, well, it's laziness or lack of
Mm,
motivation or lack of knowledge or incompetence or whatever. But the problem is never the problem. The problem always comes back to some sort of perceived threat, right?
mm.
And when we remove the perceived threat and we create prediction and response, the process of creating safety is the exact same process of creating mastery.
Wow. That's very powerful. I mean, I love your message because it's so simple. Like it's boiled down to fear, discovering what the fear is, and then we can help ourselves from that point. I can definitely relate to that in my own life. Um, I remember I used to be quite anxious, quite fearful to get on stage, and a lot of the things probably came from my childhood. Wanting that admiration from especially my dad. But yeah, having handled some of the things now and dealt with that process, I feel just a lot more comfortable on stage. And if there are certain people that don't like my message, I'll say I'm okay with that. Obviously, I hope people like it and can benefit from it. But I'm okay if there are a few people who said, you know what, this wasn't really for me. I'm like, cool, no problem.
You
So
need it really, right? If you want to stand out, then there have to be more people or an equal number of people that your message is not for, right?
yeah,
As
that's
is
true.
for, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I
Otherwise,
saw
you're
a
not
while.
standing out.
No, and I saw a while ago. There was someone that posted on LinkedIn. She had her first hater message, and like a bunch of people commented. One person commented, "You should open a bottle of champagne because this means you're doing something right." Some people are expelled by your message, which is a bit of irony in it. But obviously, most people liked her message. But having somebody that totally disagrees with you is so fine. It's so good, but obviously, you need a bit of mental strength to be okay with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the way that we know that the brain operates is that when someone's under threat, they fight, flight, or freeze, right?
Yeah.
Or they always do one of those things, or they experience negative emotion as well, right?
Yeah.
So So all attack really is a cry for help, because attack is fear based. All
Yeah.
attack is fear
Mhm.
based, right?
Yeah. And that's why I say to my clients when I work with them, if you have an audience member that's negative to you, don't go into a fight because you're going to lose anyway. Just, deal with the situation instead of fighting the person. You're going to win the audience over in that way. So, yeah. Anyway, Ed, I think it's been super interesting. I'm sure we could go on for hours. I really want to recommend Ed. Personally, I worked with you one time with some of my physical challenges. I had some problems with my Achilles heel and back thigh. Just wonderful help. And you did an amazing TED Talk, which people can also watch. Was TEDx Flexbear, and I know a lot of people really like your talk. There's a lot of good insights, so that's definitely one way to kind of get in touch with you. But what other ways that people that are watching this could they get in touch with you? What would be the best way?
On here on LinkedIn, just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I accept connection requests even from weirdos. So
Yeah. So if you are a weirdo, don't be hesitated. Go in and I know you put out great content actually pretty much on a daily basis, and it's high quality. So yeah, connect with Ed, and if you're in Ed's connection and see this, connect with me as well. I love to connect with people here on LinkedIn. So yeah. Anyway, Ed, awesome having you on the show. Do you have a
thank you.
final phrase, quote, anything you want to say?
No, I'm done. Thank you
Okay, you're
so
done.
much for having me.
All right, Ed. Take care, buddy.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye bye.